Ethan had always been the kind of man who loved quietly. He wasn't the loudest in a room, nor the one who drew attention with charm or jokes. But there was something about the way he listened, really listened, that made people feel seen. Still, beneath that calm kindness, there lived a quiet loneliness. He was 28, living in a small apartment at the edge of the city, the kind of place where the walls hummed with distant traffic and the evenings felt longer than they should. Most nights, he sat by the window after work, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. The world outside always seemed full of stories, laughter, and people finding their way home. And Ethan wondered when his story would finally feel like it belonged to someone else's. That was before Lily. He met her at a coffee shop on a windy afternoon. She had walked in with her hair tousled by the cold, holding her notebook close to her chest like it carried the whole world inside it. He remembered how she smiled when the barista spelled her name wrong on the cup, not annoyed, but amused, like she had learned to take life's little mistakes as small jokes between her and the universe. That small moment, that light, stayed with him. Soon they began to see each other often. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into talks that stretched into the night. Lily had a warmth that seemed to melt the edges of Ethan's quiet life. She talked about dreams, about places she wanted to see, and about her mother, Margaret, who had raised her alone after her father left when she was young. When Lily spoke of her mother, her tone always carried a mix of love and protectiveness. "She's strong," Lily would say. "She doesn't show it, but she's been through a lot." Keitha admired that. He admired both of them, one for her hope, the other for her strength. Months passed and their bond deepened. Yet even in his happiness, Ethan sometimes felt a flicker of doubt, not about Lily, but about himself. He had always been careful with love. He'd seen how easily promises could turn into regrets. His own parents' marriage had been a quiet storm to people who stayed together long after the love had faded, living side by side but miles apart in heart. Ethan had sworn that when he found love, he would do it right. But doing it right meant facing the truth, and that truth often required courage. One sunny morning, Lily called him, her voice bright with excitement. "Ethan, you should come over this weekend," she said. "Mom's been asking about you." I told her about us. Ethan froze for a moment. Meeting the mother, it sounded simple, but it meant something bigger. It meant stepping into the deeper part of Lily's life, into her family's history, into the stories that shaped her. "Are you sure?" he asked, half nervous, half hoping. She laughed gently. "Of course. She wants to meet the man who makes me smile so much." That sentence echoed in his mind for days. The man who makes me smile. He didn't know why it made his heart ache. Okay? Maybe because he wasn't sure if he could ever be as good as she thought he was. Saturday came quietly. The city felt lighter that morning, the sky pale blue, the air soft. Ethan spent extra time choosing his shirt, rehearsing polite smiles in the mirror, and reminding himself to breathe. He wanted everything to go well. Lily's home was a small, graceful house surrounded by maple trees. The yard was neat, the flowers well tended, the kind of place that felt loved even when no one was there. When Lily opened the door, her face lit up. She looked different here, calmer, more herself. "Mom's inside," she said, taking his hand with a reassuring squeeze. Margaret greeted him with a warm smile. She was elegant in a quiet way, silver strands in her hair, soft lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and tears. Her voice was gentle, but there was strength beneath it. "So you're Ethan," she said kindly. "I've heard so much about you." Ethan smiled, his nerves softening. "All good things, I hope." Margaret chuckled. "Mostly." They all sat together, sharing tea and conversation. Lily laughed easily, guiding the talk whenever Ethan stumbled. He could see how close she was to her mother, how every glance between them carried years of shared stories yet. As the afternoon went on, Ethan noticed something every time Margaret looked at him. Her eyes seemed to search for something beyond his words. Not judgment, not suspicion, but curiosity, as if she was trying to read the kind of love he carried. Later, Lily received a call from a friend and stepped outside for a few minutes. Ethan was left alone with Margaret. The room grew still. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than before. Margaret looked at him with a calm, knowing expression, the kind that made him feel like she already understood more than he could say. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with quiet meaning. He turned toward her, his heart suddenly uneasy. "There's something I'd like to ask you." Her words hung in the air like a whisper that carried weight. And in that stillness, Ethan felt something shift, the beginning of a conversation that would change not only how he saw Lily, but how he understood love itself. The clock on the living room wall ticked softly, each sound stretching the silence that had grown between Ethan and Margaret. Afternoon light filtered through the curtains, turning everything a faint shade of gold. Outside, he could hear the faint hum of cars passing by, the world moving on as if unaware that inside this small house, something delicate was about to unfold. Margaret set her teacup down gently. "You remind me of someone," she said, her eyes not on him, but on the window. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Someone good, I hope?" She smiled faintly. "Someone I used to know a long time ago, when life still felt young and full of promises." Her voice carried a wistful tone that made Ethan forget his nerves. It wasn't the kind of conversation he had expected. Not questions about work or plans, but something deeper, almost tender. Margaret leaned back slightly, her gaze distant. "When Lily's father and I met, we were not much older than you. He had that same quiet way. You have a calmness that made people feel safe. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest. I suppose that's why I trusted him so easily." She paused for a moment, then added softly, "We didn't last. Life has its own strange ways. People change, dreams change, and sometimes love simply can't hold everything together." Ethan listened carefully. There was no bitterness in her voice, only memory. "I'm sorry," he said gently. Margaret shook her head. "Don't be. I learned more from losing love than from having it. It taught me what truly matters. Not the big promises, but the small ones we keep when no one is watching." Her words settled into Ethan's heart like soft rain. He thought of his own parents, how silence had grown between them over the years, how he'd learned as a boy that sometimes love could exist even when words had stopped. That quiet endurance had shaped him more than he realized. He spoke softly. "My parents stayed together, but they were like strangers. I think I learned early that love isn't just about being there, it's about still caring, even when you don't have the energy to say it." Margaret looked at him with new warmth in her eyes. "Then you understand more than most." There was a pause. Not awkward, but full. The kind of pause that happens when two people recognize something familiar in each other's stories. Outside, a breeze stirred the curtains. The scent of fresh-cut grass drifted in from the yard. Ethan found himself remembering the first time Lily had told him about her childhood. About how her mother used to wait by the window on rainy evenings, reading old novels aloud just to keep the house from feeling too quiet. He had imagined that scene so many times. A small girl curled up under a blanket, her mother's voice soft and steady against the storm. Now, sitting here, he could almost see it. "She used to tell me stories," Margaret said, almost reading his thoughts. "Lily would sit on the couch holding her little stuffed bear. I'd read to her until she fell asleep. I wanted her to grow up believing in goodness, even when life disappointed her." "She does," Ethan said quietly. "She believes in people more than anyone I've ever met." Margaret's eyes softened. "Yes, that's what I fear for her sometimes. She sees light where others see shadows. It's beautiful, but it can also hurt her." Ethan nodded. "That's why I try to protect that light. She deserves someone who won't let it fade." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt warm, almost sacred, filled not with tension, but understanding. Margaret finally turned toward him. "You know," she said, "Lily once told me that you reminded her of the first person who ever made her believe love could be safe again." Ethan blinked in surprise. "She said that?" "Yes." Margaret smiled. "It's why I wanted to meet you. I needed to see for myself if the man she described truly existed." He gave a quiet, unsure laugh. "And what do you think?" I think, she said, her gaze kind, that you're still learning what love means. And that's all right. Real love is learned, not performed. Her words struck something deep in him. For years, Ethan had carried the fear of not being enough, of repeating the quiet mistakes his parents made. But in that moment, he realized that Margaret wasn't judging him. She was offering something else, a bridge between the past and the future, between the love that had once failed her and the love that might still save her daughter. He looked around the room, the family photos, the worn furniture, the warmth that filled every corner, and felt a strange closeness, not just to Lily, but to everything that had shaped her life. It was then that Lily's laughter echoed faintly from outside, the sound clear and bright. The soft murmur of the afternoon faded into quiet again. Lily had returned, cheerful as always, carrying a tray of lemonade and a plate of freshly baked cookies. The sunlight had softened to gold, spilling warmth across the room. Everything looked calm, peaceful, even, yet something inside Ethan had changed. The conversation he had shared with Margaret still echoed in his mind. Her words about love, patience, and truth lingered like a gentle ache in his chest. He could feel that the air between them was different now, not tense, but charged with something deeper, something unspoken. Lily noticed it too. You both look serious, she teased, sitting down beside Ethan. Did Mom interrogate you already? Ethan smiled faintly. A little, but she was kind. Margaret gave a small laugh. I was only trying to understand the man my daughter cares for so much. Mom, Lily said playfully, shaking her head. You can't scare him off on the first visit. Ethan chuckled, but in truth, he wasn't scared. He felt seen. It was rare for him to open up to anyone, yet somehow Margaret's quiet honesty had made him do just that. They talked for another hour, sharing stories that slipped easily between laughter and nostalgia. Margaret told them about Lily's childhood adventures, the time she tried to build a treehouse out of cardboard, or the day she painted their kitchen walls with watercolor because she wanted to make them happy. Ethan listened with a soft smile, imagining those scenes, realizing how deeply he already cared about this family. He was only beginning to know then. Just as the afternoon began to fade into early evening, something unexpected happened, a small event that shifted everything. Margaret's phone rang in the kitchen. She excused herself, leaving Ethan and Lily alone on the couch. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was gentle, filled with the quiet awareness of two people who didn't need to fill every space with words. Lily leaned back, sighing softly. You know, I was really nervous about you meeting her. Ethan looked at her, surprised. Why? She's important to me. I wanted her to see what I see in you. He hesitated, then asked, And what do you see? Lily's gaze softened. Someone who listens, someone who doesn't just hear words but feels them. I've never had that before. The room grew still. Her words touched him more deeply than she knew. For a moment, he wanted to tell her everything about his fears, his parents, the way her presence made the world seem gentler. But before he could speak, a sudden sound interrupted them. From the kitchen came a faint crash, followed by silence. Lily jumped up. Mom! They both hurried in, finding Margaret standing by the counter, a shattered glass on the floor. She looked pale but tried to smile. It slipped, she said quickly, though her hand trembled slightly. Mom, are you okay? Lily asked, worried. I'm fine, Margaret assured her, waving it off. Just startled myself, that's all. Ethan crouched down and began gathering the larger pieces of glass carefully. It's all right, he said gently. Accidents happen. Margaret nodded, though her eyes seemed distant. Lily fetched a towel and knelt beside Ethan to help. As they cleaned, Margaret stood silently watching them. There was something in her expression, a mix of recognition and emotion, as if she were seeing something more than just two people picking up broken glass. When the mess was cleared, she whispered, Thank you, Ethan. He smiled, brushing his hands clean. Of course. But then she added softly, almost to herself, You even sound like him." Lily glanced up. "Like who?" Margaret blinked, as if caught off guard by her own words. "No one, dear. Just a memory." Ethan sensed there was more behind that moment, a memory she wasn't ready to share. He didn't press her, but the feeling in the air shifted again, that subtle connection between past and present, between what was lost and what was quietly found again. They all returned to the living room, though the mood had softened. The evening light fell gently across the furniture, painting everything in hues of amber. Lily turned on a lamp, and for a while they sat in comfortable silence. Sipping tea, Margaret studied Ethan quietly from across the room. She wasn't comparing him to her past anymore. She was seeing something new. The way he looked at Lily with patience and sincerity. It wasn't the eager love of youth, but something steadier, something real. Finally, she spoke. "Ethan, may I ask you something?" He nodded. "Of course." She hesitated, then said softly, "What made you fall in love with her?" Ethan paused. The question caught him off guard. He turned toward Lily, who looked at him curiously, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. He took a breath. "It wasn't one moment," he said slowly. "It was every small one, the way she worries about others more than herself, how she makes ordinary days feel lighter. She believes in people, and somehow that makes me believe too." Margaret smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "That's a good answer." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "But remember, Ethan, love like that asks for courage. It will test your patience and your truth." Her words echoed softly through the room. Lily looked at her mother with affection. "Mom, you sound like you're giving a speech." Margaret laughed, shaking her head. "Just an old woman's advice." But Ethan knew better. There was something deeper in her tone, a story behind those words, one she hadn't told yet. Later that night, as he drove home under the quiet stretch of streetlights, her voice still echoed in his mind. Love like that asks for courage. He didn't fully understand it then, but he would soon. Because that one small accident that shattered glass, that glimpse of the past in Margaret's eyes had awakened something unseen, something that would soon test everything he believed about love, promises, and the quiet ways people heal each other. The night had settled gently over the city. Streetlights glimmered through the living room window, casting long shadows on the carpet. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of leaves outside. Ethan sat in the armchair, holding his tea, and tried to make sense of the afternoon's events. Lily had gone to check on some late work emails, leaving him and Margaret alone once more. The silence between them this time felt different, heavier, almost intimate in a quiet, contemplative way. Margaret looked at Ethan, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you know what I've noticed?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "What?" "That people often carry their hearts like fragile glass," she said, her voice gentle. "They're afraid to drop it, afraid to break it. And sometimes they hide it so carefully that no one sees what's inside." He nodded slowly, feeling a tug in his chest. He knew exactly what she meant. He had spent years guarding his own heart, never fully letting anyone in, afraid of what could happen if he let it crack. Margaret continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I see that in Lily, and I see it in you too." Ethan felt a jolt of surprise. He had always thought of Margaret as someone he needed to impress, someone whose approval he sought. Yet in this moment she wasn't judging him. She was seeing him, not just the boy dating her daughter, but the man he had been all along. He wanted to speak, to explain, to say that yes, he had been afraid, yes. He had worried that he might fail her, that he might fail Lily, but the words caught in his throat instead. He just nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken truths pressing against his chest. Margaret's eyes softened, and she leaned slightly forward. "Ethan, sometimes the things we leave unsaid are the ones that define us the most." He looked at her, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" She took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "When Lily's father left, he didn't explain why. He didn't tell me how much he cared or how much he feared not being enough. He just left. And that silence stayed with me, with both of us. Ethan felt a pang of empathy. He had feared something similar with Lily, that somehow his unspoken hesitations could hurt her. And now, hearing Margaret speak, he understood the depth of what silence could leave behind. But life, Margaret continued, also teaches us that the heart can heal if we allow it. And sometimes the heart needs courage, not to act perfectly, but simply to speak what is real, even if it trembles. Her words hung in the air like soft music. Ethan realized that the afternoon's conversation, the small accident in the kitchen, and the quiet moments of listening had led to this, a point where truth could finally surface without fear or judgment. He took a slow sip of his tea, then set the cup down. "Margaret, I want you to know," he said carefully, "that I care for Lily more than I've ever cared for anyone. I'm not perfect, and I don't have all the answers, but I'll do everything I can to make sure she feels safe, loved, and understood." Margaret's eyes glistened. She gave him a small, approving nod. "I can see that, Ethan, and I can see how much you've grown in such a short time, learning what it means to be patient, to care quietly, and to value the small moments." Ethan exhaled slowly, relief mingling with a strange kind of awe. He had never felt anyone look at him this way, with understanding, acceptance, and even a touch of gentle expectation. There was a pause. Margaret's gaze softened further, and she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know, Ethan? The hardest love is often the one that asks for nothing in return, yet gives everything silently." He shook his head, captivated by her words. "I think I'm beginning to understand." Outside, the wind rustled the branches of the maple trees, making soft patterns of light and shadow on the walls. In that quiet, Ethan felt the full weight of W. The house was quiet as evening deepened into night. Outside, the streetlights flickered faintly, casting gentle shadows across the living room. Ethan sat on the couch, his hands clasped loosely in his lap. The afternoon's conversations with Margaret lingered in his mind, filling him with a mixture of awe, worry, and something he couldn't quite name. Lily had gone to check on a few things in her room, leaving Ethan alone with Margaret once again. He could hear her soft humming from the kitchen, a song that felt familiar and comforting. And yet, beneath the calm, there was a tension in the air, an unspoken urgency, as if the house itself held its breath. Margaret set down a small book she had been reading and looked at him quietly. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle but steady, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I've never said before." Ethan felt his heart catch in his chest. He had anticipated questions, advice, even a gentle warning, but this felt different. He nodded, leaning forward slightly. "I'm listening." She hesitated, her eyes searching his face, weighing the right words. "When Lily was very young, she began her father. He left without explaining why. At first I tried to tell her that it wasn't her fault, that he loved her in his own way. But children don't always understand the complexities of adult decisions. And for a long time, she carried a quiet fear inside her. Fear that the people she loves would always leave." Casey's chest tightened. He thought of the small ways Lily had sometimes pulled back when things got serious. The way her smile sometimes carried a shadow he hadn't understood until now. "I stayed strong for her," Margaret continued. "I protected her, guided her, made sure she felt safe. But even I couldn't shield her from all the doubt she carried in her heart. And now, seeing you, Ethan, I realize that she's found someone she truly trusts. Someone who sees her, really sees her, without expecting anything but honesty in return." Ethan swallowed hard. Every word she spoke seemed to settle deeper inside him, weaving a connection he had only glimpsed before. He felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, awe, and a quiet, tense longing to do right by her. Then, after a pause, Margaret leaned forward slightly. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "I needed to tell you this because sometimes the hardest part of love isn't proving it to others. It's proving it to yourself." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of relief and recognition. He realized that the bond between him and Lily had been built not just on shared laughter or simple moments, but on patience, understanding, and trust, the same qualities Margaret valued and had protected all these years. "I understand," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "I've never felt this strongly for anyone in my life. I I want to be the person who never leaves her, who makes her feel safe, and who loves her in a way she deserves." Margaret studied him for a long moment. Her eyes, once full of quiet scrutiny, softened into something like hope. "Then show her," she said gently. "Show her through your words, your actions, your patience. Because love isn't always grand gestures. Sometimes it's the quiet consistency that leaves the deepest mark." Ethan nodded, feeling a shift within him. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, the weight of uncertainty, of hesitation, of unspoken fear. He felt ready, in a way he hadn't before, to express what he truly felt. Just then, Lily appeared in the doorway. She had changed into a soft sweater, her hair loosely pinned back, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity. She paused, noticing the quiet intensity in the room. "What's going on?" she asked lightly, though Ethan could hear the underlying softness in her tone. Ethan rose from the couch and walked toward her, his heart steady despite the flutter of nerves. "Lily," he began, his voice gentle but full of emotion, "there's something I need to tell you." She tilted her head, waiting. "I love you," he said simply, each word deliberate and honest. "Not just for the easy days, not just for the laughter, but for every quiet moment, every challenge, every time you've let me in. I promise to be patient, to be honest, and to always try to make you feel safe and cherished. I don't have all the answers, but I want to face life with you, together." Lily's eyes glistened, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath along with them. Then she smiled softly. A smile that carried years of hope, fear, and quiet longing all at once. "Ethan, I love you too," she said. "I've been afraid sometimes, but I trust you. And I want to see where this us goes." Margaret watched silently from the armchair, a gentle smile spreading across her face. She could see it now, the trust, the understanding, the love that had been growing quietly, waiting for the right moment to surface. Ethan reached for her hand, feeling the warmth of her fingers, the steady rhythm of her pulse. And in that simple connection, he felt a profound sense of clarity, that love wasn't about grand declarations or perfect timing. It was about truth, courage, and the willingness to finally speak what had always been in your heart. The room seemed to glow softly in the evening light, each shadow fading into a gentle warmth. In that moment, everything that had been unspoken, all the longing and hesitation, became clear. Their hearts had found their words, and with those words came a quiet, powerful turning point, a shift that promised new beginnings, deeper trust, and a love built on honesty and patience. Margaret rose then, placing a hand lightly on Ethan's shoulder. "You've made the right choice," she said softly. "Now, take care of her and take care of each other." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep inside him. And as he looked at Lily, he realized something extraordinary. That love, when spoken honestly and received with trust, could heal old fears, quiet lingering doubts, and ignite a bond that would endure far beyond a single moment. For the first time, he felt the full weight and beauty of love. Not perfect, not flawless, but true. And in that quiet living room, under the soft glow of evening, Ethan, Lily, and Margaret each understood something profound, that the heart, once finally unburdened, could find a new rhythm, a new trust, and a new beginning. The morning sun poured gently through the windows, filling the living room with soft light. Outside, the trees swayed lazily in the breeze, their leaves shimmering like tiny emerald flames. Ethan sat on the couch drinking coffee, but he wasn't thinking about the warmth of the mug or the quiet morning. He was thinking about yesterday, about the conversation that had changed everything between him. Lily and Margaret. Lily entered the room with her usual soft smile, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set one in front of Ethan and leaned against the doorway, a playful sparkle in her eyes. "Morning," she said lightly. "Morning," he replied, meeting her gaze. There was a new calmness in the air, something unspoken but deeply understood, the tension that had quietly hovered over their relationship. The fear of unspoken words and misunderstood feelings had been lifted. Yesterday had been the turning point, the moment when honesty and courage had spoken louder than any hesitation or doubt. Margaret joined them soon after, her presence steady and reassuring. She placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder and smiled warmly at Ethan. "I think you've done well, Ethan," she said softly. "Not because of what you said, but because of how you've shown her care. That's what matters most." Ethan felt a sense of quiet gratitude. He had always feared disappointing Lily, feared not being enough. But her mother's words reminded him that love wasn't about perfection, it was about consistency, honesty, and being present through life's small and large moments alike. Lily sat beside him, her fingers brushing lightly against his. "I feel safe with you," she whispered. "Not because everything is perfect, but because you're here, truly here." Her words settled over him like sunlight. He had never thought such simple words could carry so much weight. And yet, in that honesty, he understood the deepest truth of their relationship. Love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in being fully present, in sharing quiet moments, and in offering patience and understanding when the world felt uncertain. The morning unfolded with gentle ease. They shared breakfast together, laughed quietly over small mishaps with the toast and coffee, and reminisced about little memories, Lily's childhood stories, the times she had tried to paint her room with watercolors, and the quiet evenings Margaret had spent reading to her. Each story carried warmth, connection, and the kind of nostalgia that made even ordinary moments feel sacred. Later, Ethan and Lily walked through the garden, the sun warming their faces. The flowers were in bloom, a cascade of color that seemed to reflect the life they were building together. They spoke softly, not rushing, letting words come naturally, each one carrying meaning without need for extravagance. "I'm glad you're here," Lily said, her voice full of quiet certainty. "With me, with us." Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm glad too," he replied. "And I promise I'll keep being here, not just today or tomorrow, but for every day we can share." They paused by the maple tree, the one Margaret had pointed out as her favorite. Ethan looked at Lily, her face illuminated by the sunlight filtering through the leaves, and felt a surge of emotion, not overwhelming, but steady, profound, and enduring in that moment. He understood something important. Love, true love, was not about grand declarations or perfect timing. It was about showing up, being patient, and allowing the other person's heart to